Imagine waking up on January 1st, 2026, and your bank account has nothing in it. No stocks, no bonds, no investment portfolio quietly growing in the background. Maybe a little debt, a job that covers the bills but leaves nothing left over, and a financial news cycle that's doing everything it can to convince you that the system is broken beyond repair. Interest rates still elevated, AI threatening entire job categories, housing prices that look less like real estate listings and more like phone numbers, a cost of living that keeps climbing while wages play catch-up at half the speed. Most people look at that picture and freeze completely. They tell themselves the game is rigged, that the people who got in early already won, and anyone starting now is too late. So they do nothing. They scroll past the finance content, close the budgeting app, and go back to the same routine that got them to zero in the first place. But here's what I've learned from studying compounding, market cycles, and the way human psychology interacts with money over long periods of time. Starting from zero in 2026 is not a disadvantage if you understand what you're actually doing. In fact, for someone who is willing to be patient, disciplined, and honest with themselves, this moment presents a genuinely clean entry point. One of the cleaner ones we've seen in years. Not because the economy is perfect. It's not. But because the fundamentals of wealth building don't change with the headlines. And right now most of your competition is either paralyzed by fear or chasing the wrong things entirely. What I'm going to walk you through is not a shortcut. There are no shortcuts. What this is the mathematical path from absolute zero to your first $100,000, and from there to your first million, mapped specifically against the economic environment we are stepping into. No course at the end of this. No upsell. Just the actual blueprint. Broken down into the decisions that genuinely move the needle, and the psychological traps that quietly destroy most people before they ever get started. Let's start with the truth that most financial content conveniently skips over. If you have debt right now, your net worth is not zero. It is negative. And until you internalize that distinction and act on it, everything else we talk about today is irrelevant. There is a persistent myth that you can outinvest bad financial habits. I see it constantly. Someone is sitting on $6,000 of credit card debt at 22% interest, and they're asking whether they should put $500 into a tech ETF or a trending cryptocurrency. The logic sounds reasonable on the surface. If the market returns 10% and my interest rate is 22%, I'll just invest and pay the debt off slowly. I'll catch up eventually. This is one of the most expensive mental errors in personal finance. Here's the reality. You are not investing and paying debt simultaneously. You are paying 22% guaranteed to the bank, while hoping to earn 10% in a market that might just as easily give you negative 15% this year. You are financing someone else's wealth, while gambling with your own. Paying off a credit card, charging 24% interest, is a guaranteed 24% return on your money. Not an estimated return. Not a projected return. A mathematical certainty. There is no asset class on earth that offers you that yields with zero risk. Not the S&P 500. Not real estate. Not private equity. Nothing. So let's run the actual numbers, because emotions will lie to you and math will not. You have $5,000 in consumer debt at 24% annual interest. If you make only the minimum payment every month, you will spend the next decade paying that debt down. And by the time it's gone, you will have paid back close to double what you originally borrowed. Meanwhile, the market might have returned 8% or 10% annually, but the interest drag on that debt was silently outpacing every gain. You were rowing forward while anchored to the bottom. The strategy at this stage is not investor thinking. It is debt destruction. You list every liability you have, from the highest interest rate down to the lowest. You ignore the balance sizes entirely. Balance size is emotionally compelling but mathematically irrelevant at this step. What matters is the rate. You make minimum payments on everything except the highest rate debt, and you throw every single spare dollar you can find at that top item. You sell things you don't use. You cut subscriptions you forgot you had. You eat at home. You treat this phase like a genuine emergency, because financially, that's exactly what it is. There's a deeper layer here that most financial advice never addresses, and it might actually be the most important part. Debt doesn't just cost you interest payments. It costs you courage. When you owe money, you are operating from a position of psychological scarcity, whether you consciously feel it or not. You're afraid to ask for a raise because you can't risk losing the job. You're afraid to move to a different city for a better opportunity because the logistics feel too fragile. You're afraid to take any career risk at all because the margin for error in your life is basically zero. The true cost of that $5,000 in credit card debt isn't just the interest. It's the promotion you didn't pursue, the negotiation you lost before it started, the opportunity you watched someone else take because you couldn't afford to. Clearing this debt is not just a financial move. It is a psychological unlock that changes how you carry yourself in every room you walk into. Once that high-interest debt is gone, and only once it is gone, you move to the next phase. And here is where most people make their second critical mistake. They take the money they were using to pay down debt and they immediately move it into the stock market. And then life happens. It always does. The car needs a repair. A medical bill arrives. A family situation demands an unexpected expense. If every dollar you have is tied up in stocks, and the market happens to be down 15% when that bill lands, you are now forced to sell at a loss, just to cover a basic life expense. You have permanently destroyed a portion of your compounding, and there is no way to undo it. This is why the second move before you touch a single investment is building what I call the cash fortress. 3 to 6 months of your bare bones, survival expenses, rent, food, utilities, minimum transportation, sitting in a high-yield savings account, doing absolutely nothing interesting. And that's the entire point. This money is not an investment. It is not supposed to grow significantly. It is insurance against the unpredictability of life, and its only job is to sit there and make sure you never have to sell your investments at the wrong time. Here's a simple illustration of why this matters so much. Take two people with identical investment portfolios. The market drops 25%, which happens on average every 3 to 4 years. Then both of them lose their jobs in the same month. Investor A has no cash buffer. Every dollar is in the market. To pay rent next month, he sells stocks at the bottom, locking in that loss permanently. His compounding is fractured, and it will take years of future gains just to recover. Investor B has 5 months of expenses in cash. She doesn't touch the portfolio. She rides out the downturn, keeps her investments intact, and when the market recovers, she is whole. Same starting point, same market conditions, completely different outcomes, and the only difference was whether she had a buffer. There's also a behavioral dimension to this that compounds the financial one. When you have 3 to 6 months of expenses in a savings account, you walk into your job differently. You negotiate your salary differently. You make decisions from a position of strength rather than desperation. Most destructive financial decisions, panic, selling, impulse investing, taking bad loans, happen when people are operating without a margin of safety. The cash buffer doesn't just protect your portfolio, it protects your judgment. It creates a gap between a stressful life event and a reactive financial decision. That gap is worth more than almost any investment return you could find. Automate a transfer every single payday until this account hits your 3-month target. Then treat it like it doesn't exist. It is not for a vacation. It is not for new tech. It is not for anything except a genuine emergency. Only after this buffer is fully funded do you look at the stock market. Now you're ready to invest. And this is where a huge amount of well-intentioned advice will quietly steer you wrong. The conventional wisdom is to diversify broadly and immediately. Buy a little bit of everything, some domestic stocks, some international exposure, some bonds, maybe some alternative assets. The idea is that spreading your money across many things reduces risk, and that logic is correct, eventually. But at the beginning of wealth building, over-diversification doesn't protect you. It mathematically guarantees average of average results and prevents you from building any real momentum. You need concentration to build wealth, and diversification to protect it once you have it. Here's the other trap that is going to be especially loud in 2026. AI-powered stock-picking tools are going to be everywhere. Apps promising algorithmic alpha, machine learning-driven portfolio recommendations, platforms that claim to identify the next big winner before it moves. The pitch is compelling, and the technology sounds impressive. But here is a number that should permanently settle this question. Over any 15-year period, more than 90% of actively managed funds, run by professional investors with research teams, Bloomberg terminals, and decades of experience, fail to beat a simple index fund that just holds the whole market. 9 out of 10 professionals with every possible advantage cannot consistently outperform the index. What are the actual odds that a retail investor with a day job and a phone app is going to do it? The smarter move is to stop trying to find the needle and simply buy the entire haystack. A broad market index fund gives you the total return of the market, historically around 10% annually, before inflation over long periods. You're not trying to beat the market. You're trying to guarantee you get the market return. And over time, that is more than enough to build significant wealth. Put 90% of your investable money into low-cost broad market index funds. Total US market, with some international exposure. Set up automatic contributions. Never touch them. Except that watching this account grow is going to feel like watching paint dry. That boredom is confirmation that you're doing it right. If your investment strategy feels exciting, you are almost certainly gambling. Take the remaining 10% and give yourself permission to speculate. A specific stock you've researched, a sector you believe in, even a crypto position if that's your conviction. Keep it strictly at 10% of your investable funds, not 10% of your income, not a number you calculated in a moment of enthusiasm. If that satellite allocation goes to zero, your financial life is completely intact. If it explodes to the upside, it's a bonus. This structure protects you from your own optimism while leaving room for it. Here is the piece that most beginning investors completely overlook, and it is quietly one of the most powerful wealth accelerators available to ordinary people. Taxes. You can do everything else right. Clear the debt, build the buffer, invest consistently in index funds, and still lose 25 to 30% of your long-term wealth through poor account selection. The difference between building wealth in a tax-advantaged account versus a standard brokerage account, compounded over 30 years, is genuinely staggering. Not because of better returns or smarter picks, just because of where the money lives. In a standard taxable brokerage account, every time you sell an investment at a profit, you owe capital gains tax. Every dividend payment is taxed as income. Over decades, this tax drag consumes a massive portion of your compounding. Most people never calculate this cost because it happens slowly and invisibly, but it is real and it is large. The tax code, whether you agree with it philosophically or not, contains specific incentives designed to reward long-term saving. Ignoring them is one of the most expensive things a new investor can do. The protocol here is a strict waterfall. Your first investment dollar goes into your 401k, but only up to the employer match. If your employer matches 4% of your salary and you contribute 4%, that is an immediate 100% return on that contribution before the market does anything at all. There is no investment opportunity anywhere that competes with that math. Your second priority is the Roth IRA. You contribute after-tax dollars now, and every dollar of growth, every dollar of appreciation over decades. Withdrawals completely tax-free in retirement. The third bucket, often completely ignored, is the health savings account. If you have a high-deductible health plan, an HSA is triple tax-advantaged, contributions are pre-tax, growth is tax-free, and withdrawals for qualified medical expenses are tax-free. After those three buckets, you go back and fill the 401k to its maximum annual limit. Only after all of that does a single dollar go into a taxable brokerage account. This order of operations is not exciting. Nobody makes viral content about the waterfall method of account funding. But the compounding difference between someone who follows this structure and someone who skips it, measured over a 30-year period, can easily amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars, purely from account selection, not investment skill. Everything we've covered so far, the debt elimination, the cash buffer, the index investing, the tax optimization, all of it operates within the constraint of your current income. And that constraint has a floor, but no ceiling. This is the final and most underappreciated lever in the entire equation. You can only cut expenses so far before you hit the limits of basic living. But there is no mathematical upper bound on what you can earn. If you want to collapse the timeline from zero to financial independence, the spreadsheet alone will not save you. At some point you have to look in the mirror and ask whether you are being paid what you are actually worth, and if not, what you are going to do about it. The frugality myth is deeply embedded in personal finance culture. Skip the coffee. Pack your lunch. Cancel the streaming services. And look, wasteful spending is genuinely worth addressing. But you cannot cut your way to wealth on a median income in 2026. While inflation keeps moving the cost of living target, optimizing your expenses while ignoring your income is playing pure defense. Defense prevents you from losing ground. It does not win games. Consider the actual math. A side hustle driving rideshare might generate $20 to $25 per hour after accounting for vehicle wear and fuel. It is linear income. The moment you stop driving, the income stops. Compare that to investing 6 months of consistent effort into mastering a high-leverage skill, advanced data analysis, specialized technical sales, project management at an enterprise level, software development, financial modeling. Any of these skills, genuinely developed, can add $20,000 to $40,000 to your base salary on a recurring basis. That raise doesn't stop when you stop working. It compounds. It increases your 401k match. It gives you a larger base for every future raise negotiation. It follows you from job to job. A 15% salary increase on a $60,000 income is worth more over a career than almost any weekend gig you could build. The skill audit is simple. Look at your current role and identify the one capability that, if you genuinely mastered it, would make you significantly harder to replace and more valuable to any organization in your industry. Not 10 skills. 1. Then spend 1 focused hour per day on that skill. The time you would have given to passive scrolling, redirected into deliberate learning. In 6 months, that skill becomes leverage. Use it to ask for a raise with evidence. Use it to apply for a senior role. Use it to position yourself for the next opportunity that most people in your field won't be qualified for. Raising your income by $15,000 or $20,000 annually doesn't just give you more money to invest. It makes every single other step in this entire strategy work faster. A 20% savings rate on $80,000 builds wealth at a completely different pace than 20% on $45,000. The math is not subtle. So here is the complete playbook. Exactly as I would execute it, starting from zero in 2026. First, destroy every high-interest debt using the avalanche method. Highest rate, first. Minimum payments on everything else. Aggressive intensity until it's gone. Second, build a 3-month cash fortress in a high-yield savings account before a single investment dollar is deployed. Third, open your tax-advantaged accounts and fund them in the correct waterfall order. 401k to match. Roth IRA, HSA. Then back to 401k maximum. Fourth, automate contributions into broad market index funds and leave them alone regardless of what the headlines say. Keep the speculative allocation to a hard 10% cap. Fifth, commit to 1 meaningful skill upgrade that increases your primary income within the next 6 to 12 months. None of this is complicated. None of it requires financial genius, or perfect market timing, or access to investments that aren't available to ordinary people. What it requires is honesty about where you currently stand, patience with a process that doesn't feel fast enough, and the discipline to keep doing boring things consistently, while everyone around you is chasing something exciting. The people who build real wealth quietly are almost never the ones who found the hot stock or timed the market perfectly. They are the ones who made a clear right decision about their financial reality, executed a systematic plan without drama, and compounded small advantages over long periods of time. That's the game. And 2026 is as good a year as any to start playing it seriously. Drop your strategy in the comments. I read every one, and I'm genuinely looking for the blind spots in my own thinking. If this breakdown gave you something useful, subscribing helps me keep producing content at this level. See you in the next one.